In the spotlight tonight, remember that crazy Florida pastor who threatened to burn a copy of the Quran on September 11th to protest the planned Islamic Community Center near Ground Zero? Well, it took him 2 months, but Pastor Terry Jones finally visited the proposed site for the mosque today. Jones encouraged those building the mosque to do as he did with the whole burning the Quran thing and just change their minds. But he also discussed a larger mission, that of his new organization, Stand Up America, which will combat radical Islam worldwide.
We know that there is a very strong, violent element of Islam. We see that very, very clearly in things that have happened in America, like Fort Hood. We see it very clearly in what just happened extremely in Iraq, where around 58 people were just brutally killed and murdered. What we have to understand in America is that these things happen in the Middle East on a regular basis. That is why we hope sooner or later to bring our request in some form in front of the UN, that we might be able to look into these things and that demand that these countries like Iraq, Iran, even Egypt, that they begin to adopt normal human rights.
Joining me now, co-founder of Project Reason and New York Times best-selling author of The Moral Landscape, How Science Can Determine Human Values, Sam Harris. Thanks for being here, Sam.
Thank you.
So, how crazy is Pastor Terry Jones?
Well, he might be crazy. He's not crazy about Islam, however. I mean, it's inconvenient for our democracy that only our own religious demagogues are making sense and speaking candidly about the nature of Islam. The problem is we have this one word, religion, which everyone wants to think names a unified domain of doctrines. But religion is a word like sports. There are sports like badminton, and there are sports like Thai boxing, and they basically have nothing in common apart from breathing. And we have to be honest about the actual doctrine of Islam, specifically about the doctrines of martyrdom and jihad. And only our own religious lunatics, frankly, are incessantly honest about the liabilities of these ideas. And we have people like Mayor Bloomberg saying that 9/11 had nothing to do with Islam, and Islam is a religion of peace. And that is delusional on its face. And I think it's a destabilizing lie that we can't keep telling ourselves.
Now, someone like Pastor Jones can be, in your view, right about Islam, but what animates him is a defensive competitiveness about his own religion. Mine's better than yours. My religion's better than yours, and here's how crazy your religion is. I mean, that's what directs his thinking, right?
Yeah, no, he's right for the wrong reasons, and this is something that should trouble us. I'm worried about living in a world where the only people who are certain of moral truth are religious demagogues who think the universe is 6,000 years old, and that we'll have faith playing both sides of the board in a very dangerous game. We have to talk honestly about human well-being and about the factors that encourage it. And so Pastor Jones is not well-equipped to do that. He's well-equipped to notice that the jihadists really believe what they say they believe, and they're blowing themselves up and infringing on the rights of women based on their beliefs and not based on economic problems or our own missteps in our war on terror. But we should be talking about nuclear proliferation and climate change and education and poverty, not about things like gay marriage, which I'm sure Pastor Jones is also exercised by. And, we shouldn't be watching cartoonists have their lives threatened by people who can't tolerate jokes about the Prophet Muhammad.
Now, Ron Paul has been very clear on this subject. He says the outcry over the building of the mosque near Ground Zero implies that Islam was alone responsible for the 9/11 attacks. He says this is like blaming all Christians for the wars of aggression and occupation because some Christians supported the neoconservatives' aggressive wars in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Right. Well, it would be great if that were true. Unfortunately,
what's not
it's
true
not.
about that?
Well, the problem is that Osama bin Laden is giving a very plausible interpretation of Islam. He's not the Reverend Jim Jones of the
People
Muslim
say,
world.
he's distorting the text, and Islam doesn't say that. You say Islam does say what Osama bin Laden says it does.
Yes. Now, that you can split some hairs and talk about just when should an apostate be killed, but the crime of apostasy is punishable by death in Islam. There's no version of Islam which says you should be free to criticize the Quran. It's just the product of human minds. The Prophet Muhammad was a man like any other man and can be criticized. I mean, there's no Reform Judaism version of Islam, and we have to encourage. But
there is there are moderate Muslims.
I should be clear. In criticizing Islam, I'm not criticizing all Muslims. There are Muslims who don't take the doctrine very seriously. There are Muslims who don't read the Quran with any attention.
Same thing in every religion.
Yes, yes. But Islam is at a very different moment in its history. And it's as though we're encountering the Christians of the 14th century, armed with 21st century weapons. We have a real problem with Islam, and it's not an accident that we're not having this conversation about the Amish or Quakers or Jains or even Buddhists. I mean, ideas have consequences, and the idea that you can get to paradise by dying in defense of the faith, in fact, dying in defense of the faith is the best thing that can possibly happen to you, that is a mainstream notion in Islam.
Is there any lesson in how Catholicism worked its way through its homicidal phase of a couple of centuries for present-day Islamic extremists?
Yeah, the problem is we just don't have 500 years to work it out. We were burning heretics alive for 5 centuries in Europe, and it's understandable based on a certain reading of the Bible. We have incredibly destructive technology spreading all over the world, and it's getting increasingly easy for one person to screw up life for millions. And so, I think we have some decades at best to get straight about this and to build a viable global civilization which is compatible with human well-being. And religious demagoguery of any kind is the worst piece of software to have running on your brain when it comes time to actually engage that challenge.
Sam Harris, author of The Moral Landscape, thanks for joining me in the studio tonight.
Thank you so much.